What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to a special live edition of the Sick Podcast Talking Titans. We were expecting to be a little bit more down and out at the start of this, but thanks to some excellent news, it doesn't seem like it will be the funeral we expected it to be. We've got a great guest on who's going to be able to share his thoughts on the situation as well. Obviously, a lot of educated insight from him. We'll let him on shortly, but let's get right into it. Sammy, start me up, baby.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Talking Titans.
Ladies and gentlemen, 94 yards. Touchdown, Titans. He is the baddest man in the NFL, and he just took her to the house.
The sickest Tennessee Titans podcast.
Sick!
It's gonna be sick.
What is going on, folks? Welcome back to another edition of the Sick Podcast Talking Titans. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Vin. Jarrett is on the DL for tonight, but he will be back shortly. Let's get right into it. We have a special guest today. A new guest, technically, you could say a new segment. We got a nice little promo to roll out. Hopefully, we don't be seeing this too often. But Sammy, roll me through.
The doctor is in.
RJ Turner, welcome into the show. Our doctor on call for tonight's show. Thank you for taking the time out of your night to join us. We'll jump right into it. Obviously, we're talking tonight specifically about the injury to Treylon Burks. Early on in the process of getting all the information, we were a little bit concerned this could be something that could be long-term as it pertains to our season this year. But, you know, coming from Ian Rappaport just about 20 minutes ago, we were told that it is an LCL sprain. Now, Doc, based on your obvious educated opinion, what are we looking at? Best case, worst case scenario for him to get back to full speed and 100% for our season coming up?
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys having me. So yeah, I'm not going to lie. I've got a best friend who's a Titans fan. I've definitely got Treylon in a couple fantasy leagues. I saw the original video. Definitely thought that he blew his ACL out. So it's best case scenario that it's just an LCL. Now LCLs can get a little more complicated though. So, you know, it all depends on the severity of it. You can have a grade 1, 2, or 3 strain. We don't technically know that. I don't anticipate us to ever get that information. Because then, you know, you kind of get put under more scrutiny. But the best way to think of it is the LCL is like the lateral collateral ligament, which is the ligament on the outside of your knee. Okay, so if you have a grade 1, the best way to think of that is like if you stretch the ligament, you have small tears, but for the most part, it's pretty intact. Grade 2 is where you essentially can think of it like you tear half of the ligament or you have a partial tear. And then a grade 3 is where you have a full-blown tear. Based on Ian Rappaport's report, which I'm sure more reports are going to come out later, I would think it's going to be in the grade 1, grade 2 realm just because it seemed like they're a little more optimistic in terms of him not missing a ton of time. A grade 1, you'll probably see him in a knee brace, probably back to full speed in about a month. Grade 2, you could be looking more along like the 4 to 6 week mark. So, you know, in terms of being a full-blown wide receiver, WR1, WR2 with D-Hop, you were probably looking at more playing in an NFL Sunday game, like 2 months. But just based off the, you know, optimistic from Rappaport, I would probably say you'll see him playing in 4 to 6 weeks. So maybe miss like the first 2 to 3 weeks of the season and then be full go-ahead from there.
Okay, so you're saying, you know, and best case for us, he might only miss a game in the regular season. Might come back week 2, maybe week 3. My question is for you, doctor, is does this put other ligaments in that knee at risk, or does it put the other leg at risk because he might be compensating with the right leg to make up for the left leg? As we know with knee injuries, you know, nowadays they can be fixed, but there's a mental aspect to it where he might not be putting the weight on, even if it's subconsciously, he might not be putting that weight on the left leg going forward. Does this put other ligaments in the left leg at risk, or does it put the right leg at risk because he might compensate, or a little bit of both? Just give us, your breakdown on that. And then if it is a grade 1 sprain, and you gave a great analogy of the rubber bands, I was an exercise phys major, so you just brought me back a little bit. Do they heal on its own? Will he be getting like PRP treatment? What does that essentially look like? Do those tears, close up? Break that down for us, Doc.
Absolutely. So, first and foremost, his right leg won't be at risk per se. Now, the left leg, I would assume they're probably going to have him in like a hinge knee brace so that he doesn't further worsen this injury and go from like a grade 1 to a full-blown grade 3. So that knee brace is actually probably going to protect his other ligaments from having any further damage. So I wouldn't be too concerned from that standpoint. And then, like you bring up with your exercise phys major, they're gonna work on strengthening a lot of the other muscles and put the other ligaments through a little more stress with his rehab, so that it kind of puts him in situations that he's prepared for, so he doesn't go out there first play and his knee just buckles again, and then now he's got an ACL injury. Now you bring up the biggest point of it all. So cool, like he's gonna recover fine, and I'll kind of get into that in a second, but a lot of it is going to be a mental aspect. He's going to more than likely be having a knee brace on that knee. And what does that look like being a wide receiver? How does that look like coming in and out of your breaks on his routes? That's a whole nother conversation. I think it's probably going to take him, if I had to guess, and, I love fantasy football, so I'm definitely taking all this into account. I wouldn't expect Treylon to be Treylon maybe until past the halfway point of the season, where he realizes like, hey, my knee is good, I can do these type of things, or even to the point where he comes out of the knee brace towards the end of the season. Maybe it's going to take that for him to have that full-blown confidence again, because from the recovery standpoint, in terms of like the ligament itself, it's a collateral ligament, so he will have some blood flow from like just nearby structures and muscles and things like that, so he could have some healing going on. But more than likely, depending on the severity of it, it's going to scar down over time, and that's essentially what you're going to allow some time to do. Now, you bring up a good point, PRP, regenerative type of medicine and things like that. It's difficult to say if they're going to consider something like that, because usually when you do PRP injections, the idea is that you're going to have some type of healing response, right? So if you were to do that, I would anticipate that he's going to have a lot more time off than just saying like a couple weeks, because you got to let the body do its magic and try to heal what it can heal. So it'll definitely be interesting to see what they do. I mean, as a Texans fan, I know that's not what any of the Titans podcasts wants to hear, but your wide receivers after D-Hop and Treylon are pretty thin. So I anticipate that they are probably not going to let him sit out too long, just because this is kind of like a make it or break it year for you guys with Derrick Henry and Tannehill. And then, if you guys don't make the playoffs and kind of make a strong push, then it's like, are you guys going to blow it up? So that, when it comes to GMs and all that, you got to take all that into account. It's like, are you going to take your rookie who missed a good portion of the second half of the season last year and let him sit out half the year to rehab his knee? Or if it's a minor sprain, are you just going to bring him back in a couple weeks and see how he does? So that's the thing that you got to keep in mind.
So then you're saying Sal, you're saying best case scenario, barring there's no setbacks in him coming back week 2 or week 3, that you feel as though the ligament can be completely healed, and mentally he's going to have to play on it for 4 to 6 to 8 weeks before he fully trusts that it's healed.
Completely healed is a stretch. There will be some healing that goes on. It's just difficult. I wouldn't be surprised if you MRI'd say he comes back full go, you MRI his knee, I don't know, like 6-12 months down the road, there's some evidence that, hey, like he had an injury to his LCL at some point. So, his ligament I don't think it'll ever be what it was before, but is that going to limit him being a football player? No, I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah. So let me ask you a question, Doc. Should they have an understanding of the grade from the initial MRI, or is he going to have to go back and get additional testing done to find out the severity of it?
Yeah, they definitely know what grade it is right now based on his exam plus the MRI. They have a good understanding. Is his knee unstable? Is it a grade 1, 2, or 3? Because the MRI will give a detailed picture of that LCL. So they definitely will know. They probably won't ever release that information until he comes back and it's like week 7 and he goes off for like 150 yards and they're like, oh, Treylon Burks had a complete recovery from a grade 2 LCL and he's doing great. Right now, they won't say that to the public, and to my understanding, because then people are going to have more of a guided expectation in terms of when he should come back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it'll probably be a situation too where it's going to depend on the success of the team. If they're 2-0 after 2 weeks, I think until if they start 0-2, then maybe week 3 they bring them back. If they start 2-0, maybe, they let them get a little more rest. So, but just the fact that we know it's not season ending and it is an MCL, not an ACL, it's, the sick podcast Talking Titans was sick to their stomach this afternoon.
To say the least.
Yeah, and we got Sal's blood pressure up. It doesn't take much, but I'm glad that if all goes well, he could come back this year and be productive. At least to some extent.
Yeah, Doc. Last question I got for you before we let you go. Again, thanks so much for taking the time out of your night to join us. Let's say you're in Rand Carthon's position, who is our general manager, and you're calling the shots, bearing how our season begins. So let's put that aside. So let's not take into effect at all how our first couple weeks of the season go. How gingerly would you treat this injury as far as, what could potentially be something that lingers long term? And to just shorten that for people listening, is this the kind of injury that you can be more aggressive as far as bringing him back, or in your opinion, coming into only a year or two, should they be a little bit more patient? Just give us your thoughts on what you specifically would do if you were calling the shots.
Absolutely. I mean, here's my take on it. And a lot of this kind of hinges on the fact that y'all signed DeAndre Hopkins. You have DeAndre Hopkins. He's going to be a target hog. There was questions on how many targets Treylon was going to get anyways. I think you let Treylon have a complete recovery, meaning when he feels like he is 100% confident, he looks like himself in practice, that's when you bring him back. He was y'all's first round pick last year. I'm always a worst case scenario type of person. If you have the freedom to do that. And what I mean freedom, meaning you have DeAndre Hopkins. And so say you let Treylon come back early and he goes out there and his knee buckles again and then he tears his ACL. Now you're looking at he's missing his entire second year. He missed most of his first year. And now you're starting to have questions of, okay, usually first round wide receivers, if they're really good, you're talking about extending him in their third and fourth year. Now you've got to see if he even has a complete recovery from a further worsened injury. So, I mean, being a GM is hard. I don't envy them, but I think you guys have the freedom with D-Hop. I still think he can be a WR1. I still think he's disgusting. Former Texan. I mean, I just think he's in a bad situation in Arizona. And plus, let's be honest, you have Ryan Tannehill. This is no slight for the Titans. You have Ryan Tannehill, and you probably have the last year of a workhorse in Derrick Henry. Y'all are going to run Derrick Henry until you can't run him anymore, and y'all are going to run that play action and hit D-Hop. I don't think you necessarily need Treylon to win games right now, so I think you let him recover.
Yeah. Oh, well, listen, obviously your opinion is much more educated than either of ours, so I appreciate you indulging us with that information. We'll have to see. Like I said at the opener, you could consider this good news overall. It's not something that's gonna, take him out for the whole year like we dealt with Harold Landry last year, one of our defensive ends. So all things considered, I think we'll sleep a little bit better than we thought we would about an hour ago. So, Doc, I greatly, greatly appreciate you coming on with us tonight and sharing us that information. We hope, in a sense, I hope we don't have you on too often. And I mean that in regards to the fact that whenever you are on, it's because of players that are not playing for us. So, but obviously we love hearing all the information you have for us. And I'm sure there will be, knowing the Titans, I'm sure there will be another opportunity, multiple actually, where we're going to need your insight. But in this specific one, it was definitely good news. And I thank you for joining us tonight.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again, Doctor.
All right, Doc. Take care. All right, so that was Dr. Turner, our honorary physician for the Sick Podcast, sharing his insight on the Treylon Burks injury. Let's indulge a little bit more about what we think. Vin, I'll let you start because I'm gonna not go on a tangent, but just a little. You know how I go on my.
I know you for a little bit now. I know how you
for a little bit.
You don't need to lie to us, and you're not going to go on a
tangent. Give me your outlook on the first quarter of the year. Now that we know we're probably not going to see number 16.
Listen, I think it's going to be similar to what I said earlier. I think it's going to be a game by game basis where if the team is holding their own in the first few weeks, I would say, like Dr. Turner said, probably going to miss a month. So that brings us to week 2. September 16th against the Chargers. Who knows? He could be out there week 1. I don't know, but I think they're going to take the approach, like Dr. Turner said, the cautious one. We have D-Hop, we have Henry, we have Chig, we have reliable weapons, hopefully an improved offensive line. I think it'll be a game by game situation where if we're 2-0 or 3-0, we might not bring him back till week 4. You know what I mean? Or if we start 0-2. We might bring him back week 3 if we're starting to feel the heat, especially if Jacksonville starts out 2-0 or 3-0. And we need him. Listen, I know it's all fine and dandy. Like Dr. Turner said, you want to let him heal, but coaches coach for their job. General managers manage for their jobs. If this team is struggling, it's part of the game, injuries, unfortunately. And sometimes you have to tough it out as a player. So if we need him sooner than we might, want to bring him back, then we're going to have to do what we have to do. But until then, I think there will be a cautious approach where we play it, week by week and see how it goes and get him at LCL as close to 100% as possible. So he's mentally in the right spot to come on that field and do what he did in that video. You know what I mean? Where he makes a great catch, keeps his balance. You know what I mean? I know it was tough to see, and we were all, my stomach dropped. It hasn't dropped like that since, the breaking news came out about Derrick Henry's foot a couple years ago. But thank God he'll be all right. I do suspect now, even though I said it last night, we're not bringing in a receiver. Now I think we have to. Maybe a veteran presence that could be good for the locker room, a Jarvis Landry type who I think is a respected guy in the league, played with Tannehill for a little bit in Miami. Even if he's not going to be on your team all year, bring in another body, an experienced one. But that's how I feel about the injury. So now we'll let you have your aneurysm. So
no, I'm not going to have an aneurysm. I'm going to be really even keeled. Here's what I think they should do. I think, I understand what Dr. Turner's, thought process was. See how the season goes. Or I think you were the initial one who brought it up. See how the season goes and go from there. I personally think they should honestly kind of sort of make a decision now what their intentions are with him, whether that be being more aggressive with bringing him back or being more precautious with bringing him back. If you're taking the precautious measure, then you got to look into bringing someone else in, because as great as it is to have DeAndre Hopkins, if he's going to be getting triple teamed every Sunday for the first quarter of the season, that's not going to do us any good. We're back to square one because we already knew that Treylon Burks was going to get triple covered with nobody else out there, and now he's not going to be around. So if they're going to be more precautionary and take their time and want to see him as close to 100% as possible, then they really need to look into possible trades, possible guys that are still on the free agency board of the likes of Jarvis Landry. I made the joke last week. I won't say the name again, but that might be a guy to take a look at.
You could say it because I tweeted at him today. I asked him if he was up.
Listen, guys, Julio Jones is still available, okay? Less than 2 years ago, we thought this guy was going to be the final piece to bring us the Lombardi trophy. That wasn't the case. And then he went to Tampa Bay and did next to nothing there as well. But again, we just need bodies. And I'll tell you what, there's nobody on earth outside of DeAndre Hopkins that I would trust more in the red zone, even at his age, at this very moment, than Julio Jones. We know those hands have not aged. Maybe those legs have. But regardless, that's not going to happen, obviously, in no way, shape, or form. People are saying, hell no. I think it's ironic that literally it was like Christmas morning, Julio Jones, just because he got hurt and we didn't go to the playoffs or we didn't win a playoff game, now it's like, we're asking of. But the bottom line is you're going to have to bring someone in. If you're going to be more on the aggressive side and say, you know what, the second he thinks he's ready to run some routes live, we're going to throw him in there. Then you could take the back seat and say, you know what, we'll see what we got. We still have, what's his name from Houston? Chris Moore was looking good. Healthy Kyle Phillips, our tight end core, obviously. But if you're going to be on the precautionary side, you got to look at someone. You got to look at anyone. Kenny Golladay, absolutely. Wouldn't mind him in any way, shape, or form. Obviously we don't have a lot of trade capital, so that might be a little bit different, a little bit harder, I should say. I'd love to get Corey Davis back. Somebody brought that up, even though he's another injury-prone guy. I'd love to see him back, but they'd have to trade because he's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I don't see them making a trade.
No, absolutely not.
I think we have 4 picks next year. A 1, a 3, a 5, and a 7, something like that. I don't know, but I think if we bring someone in, it'll be a veteran off the street, just like a Jarvis Landry. I don't see Galladay. I think he might be out of the league for forever now. I think he's not a Vrabel kind of guy. I can't see him working on this team and this culture. But we could bring in somebody. But I'll tell you what, and I might be a little bit in love with this guy. I think Tajay Spears is going to be on the field a lot from the start. And we're talking about Kyle. You said Kyle Phillips. I said Chig. I think they're going to use this kid Tajay Spears in very, very creative ways. You're going to see him in the slot. You're going to see him in the backfield with Henry. You're going to see him be our feature back on some drives. He's going to catch passes out of the backfield. You could see him on special teams, I think. He is an offensive weapon I think they are going to utilize, and he might get a little more action than we thought if Burks takes a little bit longer than we would have liked to for him to get back. So
Yeah. I mean, listen, again, we start off the show with these words, and it's the honest truth. This is a relief. The news we found out today. It looked really grim based on all the videos we saw and the fact that he got carted off. As
soon as you see carted off, you just assume.
Yeah, it's over.
I have pictures in my mind of Mariota in the air cast, the second year in the league. You know what I mean? Where he was turning into the quarterback we thought he could be, not to bring that up. But I literally, when they say carted off, I just think like pictures of him in an air cast being called off where you're like, that's it. It's
basically crying.
Yeah, it's over, and we're going to have to look elsewhere. And it was, shit. Now it's like we thought maybe we had a 50-50 chance to win the division. Now it's an uphill battle. You know what I mean? But, it was best case scenario. I'd almost rather take this over a hamstring strain.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
What it would have been, because that's, a very tough injury from that soft tissue. Yeah, if anyone's pulled a hamstring and you come down on it, man, it literally feels like someone is yanking the back of your leg.
Yeah.
So this was best case. It wasn't an MCL, it wasn't a meniscus, it was an LCL. And I don't know how much trust we have in our training staff, considering the mountain of injuries we've had the last 2 years. But I think we're going to do right by this kid. And I think the Titans, Vrabel's personality, I know you said they need to come out soon and say something. I think they keep it close to the vest. They're going to keep it internal. It's going to be a day-to-day thing. And I don't think we'll know his availability for week 1 until the week leading up to the first week of the season, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate because it's going to be on all of our minds for that whole time, but that's probably what's going to happen.
It's going to be on our minds, but we could take a little bit of relief in the fact that it's not season ending. He will be back, whether it's week 2, week 4, or you put him on PUP for the first 6 weeks. I really don't give a shit, because if we can go 3-3 without him, 4-2, we need the best Treylon Burks to be able to win this division.
I don't personally foresee us really doing well. He really is so important to this football team.
Absolutely.
He really is. I think going 500 before the bye is a dream without him. I really do. It just there's only so much everyone can do. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins is a game changer. Obviously, Chig is on the rise. Obviously, Derrick Henry, but he's just such an integral part to this offense. And it's going to be tough, but we'll see what happens. I'll say this. The defense looks great. I'll say, outside of Sean Murphy bunting, who I really like, Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, he got hit by Justin Jefferson.
I know, but people are saying he's a top 10 AFC corner. He looked like.
We'll see. We'll see.
We'll see.
He's going to start. You better believe he's going to start.
Yeah, of course he's going to start.
Or, so we better hope that he's all right.
Yeah,
and you do it before with the cornerback position. It could be a top 10 unit, top 5 unit, or it could be bottom tier in the league. You know what I mean? Depending on the steps our second and third year players take, depending on, how healthy the secondary is. Yeah. So, we'll see. The defense, I'm not worried about that. Defensive line is going to be a problem. It'll make everyone's life easier. The linebacking core, the secondary. So at least, we have that to look forward to. Yeah. But,
Yeah, and Brandon brings up Colton Dowell, and obviously he's semi-kidding. Didn't see enough of him against the Bears. Need to see a lot more of him now against the Vikings because
we might be getting that Jarrett's favorite player might be gearing up for that WR2 spot.
No. God forgive me.
WI is WR2.
God forgive me. I am so fucking tired of hearing about Nick Westbrook-Akina. Okay, like he's below average, guys. You got to get. I'm not talking about you, Van. I'm just talking about specifically anyone who has him. Thinking he's. You remember in whatchamacallit? What's the movie Hall Pass? When Owen Wilson's looking at the girls and he's got and the other guy's got his hands up and he's like, "Oh, look at him now! Look at it." We don't fucking ever have wide receivers. So when a guy comes along who catches 60% of the balls thrown to him, we're like, "Oh my god, Nick Westbrook is a below average wide receiver."
He's a special teamer. He's a career special teamer. Wide receiver 4, 5, maybe in a pinch.
I don't want to see him. So let's hope that is not the case. Let's hope Chris Moore is like the second coming of Matthews back in the day before he went crazy.
Going to be more indicative of what we do with Treylon Burks. How you said the Titans need to come out and say what their plans are with him. What will be more indicative of how we feel about Treylon Burks as an organization is how quickly we do or do not bring in somebody.
Oh yeah.
If they bring in somebody tomorrow, if we hear tomorrow that they're bringing in Galladay or Landry or whoever for a workout, then it's like, okay, it's probably going to be, multiple weeks into the regular season. But if the weekend rolls around and there's no talk of, them bringing in a veteran or anybody in general, then maybe it's less serious than some people might think. So depending how fast they do or do not bring somebody in, I think will be our way of telling how the Titans feel about, the severity of the injury.
Yeah, I mean, I think they should do that anyway. And if I didn't say it last show, then I'd forgotten because I wanted.
No, we always do. We always.
Yeah,
it is a need. It is a need, and like we said, if one of these guys went down, God forbid, and it happened, then who's your wide receiver too? Who you really trusting? You know what I mean? Then
nobody.
You have to put the load back on Henry, which we don't want to do at this point in his career. We want to keep him fresh around 200 carries by the time we get to the playoffs. And now
that's not going to happen, but that's
I know. But now I feel like it kind of forces our hand a little bit. Now we might have to lean on him more than we wanted. But listen, we're talking all kinds of crazy scenarios. It was a good outcome today, all things considered. Yeah. And we'll see what happens in the next few days. Who they bring in, who they don't bring in. And they'll come out with something, you know what I mean? It'll be bland, a multiple week injury that they're going to, take week to week, yada, yada. It'll be very political from Vrabel.
So here's the last thing I'll bring up before we let everyone go tonight. And obviously we'll see you next week. Of course, make sure you like the show. If you haven't already, please do subscribe, share it with all your Titan friends. We're trying to make noise in the space, and any help we can get is appreciated. We're doing really good things so far. But last thing I'll say before we go, I made a comment earlier today on Twitter about, how the Titans should be using players in practice. And people went up in arms. Just to clarify that a little bit. Obviously, I know that everyone in the NFL, no matter how good or bad you are, now some people cheat the system. The superstars that are free agents, they cheat the system. They'll sign with teams late in the offseason so they don't have to practice as much. But everyone who was there, everyone who signed, is supposed to practice. I get that 110%. 110%. But the bottom line is this. When you got a guy who where his talent is, the level of talent he brings, exactly what you're going to get at him on Sundays when healthy. There's just no reason at all to be taking deep shots down the field to him with people covering him on other NFL teams. There's personally, if I was the coach, I wouldn't allow him doing it against Kevin Byard. But I'm not. But regardless, especially not against people who are on other teams who couldn't give a shit, who probably, now I didn't see who was covering him in that play, but I'll bet money that likely it's probably a guy that's a bubble guy, whether he's going to make the team or not. Now, he didn't have really a big impact of him getting hurt. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying I just don't see the point of setting guys up for potential injuries that are unnecessary. Like, and I said this in the video I posted on Twitter. If this was Racey McMath, okay, we need to find out if he's worth being on the roster. Throw him a fly route 50 yards down the field and see what he can do when it's contested. But a guy like Treylon Burks, there's no need for it. Yes, you need to practice. Yes, you need to get touched. You need to feel other men's pads up against yours so you know what you're getting yourself into for this season. But, I mean, I didn't foresee the reason they needed to do things like this, especially in an organization that is consistently plagued by injury. I know the other 31 teams do these things. There's a video of Garrett Wilson, Aaron Rodgers lofting one up. He burns the guy, takes him to the house. Everyone does it. I get that. But the reality is all that needs to happen is to Garrett Wilson is what needs to happen to Treylon Burks. Little trip up. You land on your leg the wrong way. And now what? The Jets without Garrett Wilson, they're going to be okay. They have other weapons, a lot of other weapons, but that's a huge loss. I don't understand why these superstars need to go to that extreme during organized practice. And that's my stance, and I'm firm on it. You want to do route running, practicing with nobody on? These guys have been playing football their whole friggin' lives. Nobody's going to tell me that if Treylon Burks isn't getting 100 deep balls or 100 routes that are contested in the offseason, that he ain't making big plays in the regular season. That's just not how that works. If you want to have guys running routes, just eliminate the possibility of devastating injury. And there's ways that I think you can do that, especially with the upper echelon players. So that was my stance on it. Vin, quickly, I'd love to hear what you think, and then we'll wrap up for tonight.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. You know, I do believe obviously you have to practice. Of course you do. But I agree in the sense that especially when you're doing these, dual practices, you might be getting a guy who's looking to prove a point on the other team, whoever was covering Treylon Burks, where you just put a very important player on our team in a precarious situation. It's really not that it's a lose-lose, but if he burns somebody and looks good and catches a touchdown, great. But it's a dual practice against, a team that we're not even going to play this year. I don't think the Vikings, that we very rarely ever play. And if he gets hurt, well, then what was it all for? So I entirely agree with you. They need to get on the field. They need to practice. But I'm with you 100% that sometimes I'd be more happy to see Chris Moore and Kyrus Jackson and Roberson and Mason Kinsey and Kyle Phillips try to fight for that 3 spot to figure out who we have. You know what I mean? As opposed to putting DeAndre Hopkins and Treylon Burks in situations where they're going up against another player on another team who might be looking to make a point, who's not going to take it easy because he's your teammate. He's going to try to run step for step with you. And when you have 2 grown men that are running full speed down the field, it only takes, like you said, 1 trip up, your feet get tangled. And is it really worth it? Yes, players get hurt, and it's a violent game, but there's also some precautions you could take, like you said, especially when the past 2 years we've historically been the most injured team in the history of the NFL, like literally the most injured team the last 2 years. And especially since, we want to make sure he's on the field week 1 because we saw good things from him at certain points during the last year.
Great things from him at certain points.
Great things. That Green Bay game, he looked great. That touchdown catch against Philly, he got knocked out cold, but he hung on to that ball and got
How about that Bengals catch when he caught him 2 guys on?
Absolutely. And even when Henry, when Henry had that was the Bengals game, yeah? When Henry ran the long run and Treylon Burks followed him and ended up recovered it in the end zone, saw good things from him. But he also wasn't on the field a full season. So they, in my opinion, to side with you a little bit, should take every precaution to make sure their second-year guy is ready to go week 1. And by doing that, you can't put him in situations where, listen, you want to play some soft coverage with your own guys in practice, to let it fly a little bit, sure. But, to play press man coverage against another team, in a meaningless practice, we saw what could happen. Obviously hindsight's 20/20 because we could have saw videos today of him, burning players and, being fine after practice. But he did get hurt. It was scary. We escaped what could have been a nightmare situation. And to end it real quick, Sal, I know you'll agree with this. I don't think we see much of anybody of importance the rest of training camp in these dual practices. Tannehill, Henry, Chig, Hopkins.
That's my last point.
Wrap them in bubble wrap and, let them be ready for week 1 because we got away with murder once. You can't keep playing with fire. Eventually you'll get burned. So
I'm so glad you brought that up. This will be my final point. We wrap up. For the people who are on my behind about the things that I said, well, let me ask you a question, right? How confident how comfortable are you now with DeAndre Hopkins taking a 50-yard fly route football? Are you signing off on that if you're running the practice? No, you're not. You're not. So why is it different now that our bona fide number 2 is going to be out and we're gonna shield our players from possible injury? But it wasn't okay 5 hours ago when we only had 2 reliable receivers on the whole freaking team. So you got to keep the same energy. I know there's nobody out there now that's like, yeah, throw DeAndre, keep throwing the ball to DeAndre Hopkins, keep giving him reps. It's the NFL. No. You can say whatever you want on Twitter behind closed doors. You don't want DeAndre Hopkins taking 1 deep rep in a joint practice anymore. Nor do you want Derrick Henry going full pads against another defense right now. Because if you do, you're crazy. Because if these guys get hurt, then just wave the white flag. Just wave it. I mean, it's silly. Yes, players have to practice, but you need to protect your players. And in my opinion, allowing Treylon Burks to do basically a go route against a Minnesota Viking defender in a joint practice was asinine, completely asinine. Just like seeing him do crazy jump catches in the corner of the end zone in the bubble. Obviously, it's sick. I comment on it. Oh my God, this guy! Like I love watching it, but in reality, I'm like, what? That's like you're landing right on another defender's leg. I mean, it's scary. But regardless, it is what it is now. Let's move forward. Let's think positive, and let's find out if we bring anybody in. So, guys, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining our live show. Jared, I forgot Jared was in a great podcast tonight. Man, we'll get him back here. We'll get you back in here, Jay. So, Captain Trips, thanks so much for the love. Volcano, Chig. Chig. Well, Chig's got because Wiley looks like a fucking mess, and he's hurt now. It looks too. So, could be some jitters. We'll see. But we know Chig. We know Chig's the man. Roberson. He doesn't excite me, but who knows? It's just such a shame. We always got to talk about these fucking journeymen and these other people who are going to help us out, but no more tangents for us. We've been on long enough. So guys, again, thanks for joining us. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. We're here every single week for the best Titans content we can offer you. We got some guest lined up soon, and obviously season's right around the corner. So hope everyone has a great night, great day, great week. And as always, tighten up. Sammy, send me out.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Talking Titans on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.